It is by no means an exaggeration to say that One Piece has some of the most iconic antagonists in all of manga. But what truly sets One Piece apart from any other battle shonen is not its individual villains, but how brilliantly the progression of villains is woven into the story's overall narrative structure. More than any other story that I've ever experienced, One Piece uses its enormous length to full advantage and pulls off an unrivaled feat of long-term storytelling. The series of pirates that One Piece's protagonist, Monkey D. Luffy, overcomes itself tells a tale of how he gets closer to his goal of becoming King of the Pirates. And with that, I don't only mean that the increasingly powerful enemies that Luffy defeats serve to gauge his growth in strength. More importantly, every pirate that Luffy encounters is also philosophically closer to the position of Pirate King. And by overcoming these opponents and the values they represent, Luffy inches closer towards fulfilling his dreams of attaining Pirate Regency. Hello, my name is Sean, and I break down what makes great stories tick. So, the first thing we need to establish is what makes for a great villain. In terms of their structural role, antagonists serve as a thematic foil for a story's protagonist. In other words, a villain typically has a worldview and a philosophy that in some way opposes that of the story's hero. This leads them to either pursue goals that are radically opposed to those of the protagonist, or to pursue the same goal as the protagonist, but through very different means. And One Piece features fantastic examples of both to illustrate what sets Luffy apart from all the other contenders for the status of Pirate King. But before discussing how Luffy's opponents fit into One Piece's overarching narrative, I need to touch on its overall story structure and the geography of the One Piece world. This world consists of 4 seas, the East, West, North, and South Blue, which are divided by the Grand Line, which runs from east to west, and the Red Line, a landmass that runs from north to south. The story of One Piece revolves around pirates who are searching for the eponymous treasure, the One Piece, which was left behind by Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, and is rumored to lie at the end of the Grand Line. We follow Luffy as he sets out to find this legendary treasure and become the new Pirate King. So, the first 100 chapters of One Piece take place in the East Blue, where Luffy sets out to find a crew and to travel to the Grand Line. The East Blue is known as the tamest of the 4 blues, and most of its inhabitants fear the Grand Line, which they dub the Pirates' Graveyard. After his adventures in the East Blue, Luffy and his Straw Hat Pirates reach the Grand Line. For the next 500 chapters, the Straw Hats traverse the first half of the Grand Line, which is also known as Paradise. But upon reaching the halfway point of their journey, the moment where the Grand Line meets the Red Line, Luffy suffers a series of devastating defeats. He decides to spend 2 years training to become strong enough to complete the second leg of his journey. And after this time skip, the Straw Hats enter the second half of the Grand Line, the so-called New World. This is where the world's most powerful pirates gather, those who have managed to survive all the ordeals to this point. But what makes the geography of the One Piece world so clever from a structural perspective is that the 3 main narrative stages of the story are also demarcated by physical boundaries. We get the journey from East Blue, which is the story's prologue, to Paradise, the main story's first half, and then finally the New World, the main story's second half. And it's also stressed that every pirate seeking out the One Piece follows the same trajectory, regardless of their starting point. They are funneled from the Four Blues through a single entrance of the Grand Line and through the Red Line until the end of their journey. The race to the One Piece is a struggle for survival, with pirates dropping out at each stage once they are unable to keep up with their competition. And what all this means is that the pirates that Luffy encounters at each step of his journey are also representative for his progress towards becoming the next pirate king. So, when Luffy first embarks on his quest, he's a complete nobody. He has no crew, no ship, and no standing in the pirating world. He's also in the tamest of the Four Blues, the place where hardly anyone holds grand ambitions or pursues their dreams. Tellingly, the first person that Luffy meets once he sets out from his hometown can't even comprehend the idea that someone would choose to venture to a dangerous place like the Grand Line. But for Luffy, on the other hand, the Grand Line's other name is much more applicable, because in his view, the Grand Line seems like a paradise. And in the same way, what distinguishes most of East Blue's pirates is that their motivations are completely opposite of those of Luffy's. Where Luffy is unabashedly proclaiming his desire to become nothing less than the king of the pirates, most of his adversaries are content to eke out a living in a small pond. So, illustrating this, the defining characteristic of Luffy's first adversary in the story, Iron Mace Alvida, is that she punches downward, bullying those who are weaker than her. And other East Blue antagonists, Buggy the Clown and the fisherman pirate Arlong, have returned from the Grand Line, where they were part of powerful and influential pirate crews, and gone to the East Blue, where they're now relatively small-time pirates terrorizing minor towns in the most peaceful sea. But the most explicit contrast to Luffy's ambitions is Captain Kuro. Until 3 years before the beginning of the story, Kuro was a notorious pirate in the East Blue. But once his reputation had caught up with him, and he had become tired of being pursued by the Navy, he decided to cast aside his identity. He devised a plan to become the sole heir of a wealthy young girl and murder her, which would offer him a small fortune and a peaceful retirement. But when Luffy comes into conflict with Kuro, their confrontation also represents a clash of two diametrically opposed worldviews. Luffy, even though he's barely embarked on his pirate adventure, takes pride in the title of pirate and believes that a pirate should face the consequences of their actions. Whereas Kuro views his identity as a pirate as a mantle that can be cast off at any time. Luffy's eventual victory over Kuro showcases that a true pirate will always be victorious over someone who has abandoned the pirate's codes. Luffy's next pirate opponent, Don Krieg, is a step further than all the other adversaries he's faced up to this point. Because unlike his earlier foes, the Krieg pirates actually set out to conquer the Grand Line and discover the One Piece. But despite their numbers, the Krieg pirates were completely decimated as soon as they entered the Grand Line. They barely made it out alive, with their ship in tatters. Nevertheless, Don Krieg is hell-bent on returning to the pirates' graveyard. In his view, he had all the strength and numbers that he needed to succeed in the Grand Line. All that he lacked was the necessary information. So, although both Luffy and Krieg are aiming at becoming king of the pirates, the two captains are completely opposed in terms of their position in the pirating world and their means they use to reach their goals. The first significant contrast between Luffy and Krieg is the size of their crews. Don Krieg stands at the top of an armada of 5,000 pirates, whereas Luffy has at this point only 3 crew members to his name. And in terms of combat, Don Krieg draws his strength from an arsenal of powerful weapons. His body is protected by a sturdy steel breastplate that's equipped with firearms. He carries diamond gloves on his fists, wields a spear that explodes on contact, and his cape is studded with spikes. He's a man who will not shirk from any means to ensure victory. But Luffy, in contrast, faces his challenge with only his bare hands and sheer determination. All these juxtapositions present Luffy's battle with Don Krieg as a litmus test of sorts for his readiness to tackle the Grand Line. Because although every factor appears to be in Krieg's favor, experience, numbers, equipment, the narrative frames Krieg's mindset as fundamentally misguided. Unlike Luffy, who until this point has celebrated success after success, Krieg's armada suffered a crushing defeat as soon as they entered the Grand Line. So if a powerful pirate like Don Krieg could not face this challenge, what will allow Luffy to survive his voyage? Towards the end of their fight, one of Luffy's allies provides an answer from his experience as a seasoned pirate. What distinguishes Luffy from Krieg is his guts and willpower, which in the grand scheme of things matter much more than any form of weaponry. From an early stage, the narrative of One Piece establishes that anyone who wants to succeed in the Grand Line needs to embrace a certain mindset. Krieg's focus on numbers and weaponry is shown to be completely misguided in the face of Luffy's overwhelming determination. But the story truly begins when the Straw Hats enter the Grand Line, and the enemies they face are accordingly on an entirely different level than the villains from East Blue. Nevertheless, there's still a major difference between Luffy and his opponents in Paradise. None of these antagonists in the first half of the Grand Line is truly competing for the title of Pirate King and striving to advance in their pirating voyage. They've attained a comfortable position, set their sights on other goals, or experienced a devastating defeat that crippled their ambitions. Time and again, Luffy's aspirations are ridiculed by established figures in the world of piracy. Yet each time, Luffy comes out on top and proves that even more experienced foes can be overcome by superior convictions. So illustrating this, Luffy's first major antagonist from the Grand Line is Sir Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, which is a group of powerful and notorious pirates who have allied with the world government. The contrast with the East Blue villains is pronounced. Now that the Straw Hats have entered the Grand Line, they're no longer facing small-time pirates, but one of the most important players in the world of piracy. Crocodile is at the head of a secret organization called Baroque Works, whose members are hidden under a cloak of anonymity. The Baroque Works agents refer to each other by codenames and don't know the true identity of its other members. Crocodile's ultimate goal here is to take over the desert kingdom of Alabasta by discrediting its royal family and inciting a civil war. But on their journey into the Grand Line, the Straw Hats befriend Vivi, the Princess of Alabasta. Vivi has infiltrated Crocodile's organization and now enlists the Straw Hats' help to stop Crocodile from destroying her kingdom. The Alabasta arc stresses two important contrasts between Luffy and Crocodile. First of all, Crocodile views himself as leagues ahead of Luffy. He repeatedly reminds his opponent that he, Crocodile, is a member of the Seven Warlords, whereas Luffy is only a no-name pirate who has just entered the Grand Line. Crocodile harps on about Luffy being a dime in a dozen, and how he has already crushed the ambitions of many upcoming pirates like Luffy. And similarly, he belittles Vivi's attempts to save her kingdom, because in Crocodile's view, ideals should only be held by those with the strength to back them up. But Crocodile's worldview also paints him as a deeply disillusioned man. After all his time at sea, he has lost sight of the ultimate goal that a pirate should strive for, and tempered his aspirations. In the face of Luffy's uncompromising drive, even an ostensibly ambitious goal, like taking over an entire kingdom, seems like a rather modest, second-rate objective. And when Luffy eventually does take down Crocodile, he is not only taking his first major step as an upcoming pirate, but also affirms that reaching the top of the pirating world requires corresponding ambitions. But the most important contrast between these two pirates revolves around trust and friendship, the central themes of the Alabasta arc. In Crocodile's shadowy organization, members are hidden behind codenames, and even its higher-ranking officers don't know their leader's true identity. All this reflects the warlord's unwillingness to put trust in others. But over the course of the arc, we are shown that Crocodile's dismissal of friendship and trust is not only misguided, but even the cause of his downfall. We are shown time and again that the Straw Hats succeed because of their unconditional friendship with Vivi and their unwavering loyalty to their allies. In the most high-stakes storyline to this point, each member of the crew proved their willingness to surpass their limits in order to help Vivi save her kingdom. And Luffy's loyalty to Vivi leads him to get up time and again when Crocodile knocks him down, until he eventually finds a way to overcome his adversary. When Crocodile sees that Luffy is approaching him for a third time after two devastating defeats, he can't even fathom what could compel Luffy to keep trying. Luffy responds that Vivi's drive to save her kingdom keeps him going as well. But towards the end of the arc, we are even shown that Crocodile ultimately fails to achieve his objectives because of his inability to forge genuine bonds with his subordinates. As it turns out, the true reason he sought out Alabasta was to lay hands on an ancient weapon called Pluton that was rumored to be hidden in the kingdom. Crocodile originally formed Baroque works together with a woman called Nico Robin, the only person in the world who can decipher ancient texts that reveal the location of both Pluton and, as we learn later in the story, the One Piece. Over the years, Robin was Crocodile's closest aide and the only person who knew his true identity. Yet in the end, Crocodile betrays her leader. She reveals that she never planned to divulge the secrets in the first place. And Crocodile quickly strikes back. After all, he also never trusted Robin. In this sense, Crocodile's plan was flawed from the start, the one thing he needed was gaining Robin's trust, something that a person like Crocodile could never attain. And in contrast, Robin later joins the Straw Hats, who over the course of the story prove their unwavering loyalty to her. So ironically, Crocodile had the one person on his side who could have actually made him the Pirate King, but let this opportunity slip through his fingers because of his inability to forge bonds with others. Where Crocodile challenged Luffy's trust in his friends, Luffy's next antagonist is his polar opposite when it comes to his pursuit of his dreams. After leaving Alabasta, the Straw Hats see a galleon falling from the sky, and on inspection they discover a map of a sky island. Luffy is immediately captivated by the thought of visiting this island in the sky, so they travel to the next island, Jaya, where they hope to find out how they could reach this mythical location. The crew lands in the significantly named Mocktown, where they encounter the pirate Bellamy the hyena, who's the local top dog. Bellamy quickly picks a fight with Luffy in a bar, but the encounter takes a turn for the worse when the Straw Hats inquire about the Sky Islands. The entire bar bursts out in laughter at the very idea that there might be islands in the sky, and Bellamy then uses this opportunity to proclaim his worldview. The age of pirate pipe dreams is over, and fools who are blinded by fantasy treasures, such as Sky Island or the One Piece, miss the riches lying right at their feet. Bellamy winds himself up further by the Straw Hats' interest in the Sky Island and eventually lashes out against Luffy. But Luffy, surprisingly, does not respond in kind. And this is particularly striking because initially he was fully prepared for a tavern brawl. Yet he backs off and tells his crew not to retaliate once Bellamy mocks the idea of pirates pursuing their dreams. So in Luffy's view, it seems, Bellamy is no longer a worthy opponent. This changes later in the Jaya arc, however, when Bellamy steals the treasure of Mont Black Cricket, a man that the Straw Hats had befriended on the island. Cricket is a dreamer like Luffy. He's searching for a lost city of gold that's rumored to be somewhere around the island. Even when Bellamy was beating up Cricket, Cricket insists that someone who makes light of another person's dreams cannot call themselves a true pirate. And after Luffy discovers what Bellamy had done, he storms off to Mocktown. Whereas he didn't mind being ridiculed earlier, Bellamy for him truly crossed the line when he stole Cricket's treasure. So during the second confrontation between Luffy and Bellamy, visual symbolism underlines the difference between the two opponents. Luffy stands high on top on a tower and looks down on his opponent, who remains on the ground. And all this leads to one of the most satisfying moments in all of One Piece. Luffy defeats Bellamy in a single punch. So in the end, it becomes apparent to everyone that a man with as weak beliefs as Bellamy could never measure up to a pirate like Luffy. And when Luffy departs with Cricket's treasure, Bellamy's right hand tries to stop Luffy in his tracks. "Where are you going?" he asks. And Luffy then delivers what is perhaps the most clever retort in the entire series, because all he says is, "The sky." This response brilliantly brings together the actual storyline and the symbolic undercurrents of the Jaya arc. The Straw Hats' next destination is indeed literally an island in the sky, which is One Piece's most pure representation of the impossible, the land of dreams. But Luffy's ultimate dream is more than just reaching this Sky Island. Since he has set his sights on the title of Pirate King, he has to figuratively reach for the sky to make his wildest dreams come true. The final pirate that Luffy overcomes during his journey through paradise is another member of the Seven Warlords, a man called Gecko Moria. Moria is the ruler of Thriller Bark, an island that was converted into a giant pirate ship. The scenery and inhabitants of Thriller Bark are all inspired by horror movies, and much of this is made possible by Moria's powers. He's eaten the Shadow Devil fruit, which allows him to steal people's shadows and use them to reanimate corpses. With his abilities, Moria has a legion of zombies at his disposal. When we're first introduced to Moria, his most important characteristic is his laziness. He's being woken up after sleeping for 4 days straight, and then the first thing he does is order his commanders to make him the Pirate King. Moria's ambition is to become King of the Pirates without lifting a single finger himself. The story even notes that his motto is to rely on others. Time and again, Moria relegates his tasks as captain to others, to his commanders, his zombies, and even, when Luffy challenges Moria directly, to his own shadow. But as we learn over the course of the arc, Moria's current state is the result of a devastating defeat he suffered in the past. Moria was once too an ambitious and confident pirate with a talented crew. But one day, his entire crew was killed by Kaido, who's one of the 4 emperors, those being the heads of the 4 most powerful pirate empires in the New World. These events have deeply scarred Moria. Ever since that day, he no longer relies on mortal subordinates. So in an ironic twist, the user of the Shadow Fruit is revealed to be a shadow of his former self. He has abandoned the New World and lingers in the first half of the Grand Line, where he harasses weaker pirate crews and waits for the day that he will be magically crowned King of the Pirates. Moria's dismissal of mortal crewmates is starkly juxtaposed to the Straw Hats group dynamics. Because of all One Piece's storylines, the Thriller Bark arc is the one that most strongly highlights the value of Luffy's crew. 2 parts of the arc stand out in particular on this front. First of all, there's the battle between Luffy's crew and Oars. Early in the arc, Moria successfully steals Luffy's shadow and plants it in the corpse of Oars, an ancient giant. The Straw Hats have to buy time for their captain and fend off this monstrosity. Over the course of an arduous battle, their combined efforts stop Oars long enough for Luffy to return, and finally, they all bring down Oars together. This is significantly the only major team fight the Straw Hats have in the entire series. And the second instance of the value of Luffy's crew is when another warlord appears after the defeat of Moria. Luffy's right-hand man Zoro gives the greatest possible demonstration of his loyalty to his captain. In one of the series' most iconic moments, Zoro offers to cast aside his own ambitions and give up his life to save Luffy. This all proves how flawed Moria's views have become. Without a loyal and powerful crew, we are shown, even the most powerful pirates could not conquer the seas. but Moria is also contrasted to Luffy on a more personal level. During the climax of their fight, a gigantified Moria traps Luffy in a cage of shadows and tramples on it. As Moria cries out that this is the result of getting in over your head, he appears to be projecting his own trauma and insecurities onto Luffy. But to his shock, Luffy, the man who has eaten the rubber devil fruit, emerges unscathed. After all, rubber always bounces back. Unlike Moria, who never recovered from his defeat against Kaido, Luffy will not allow himself to be pounded down. After departing from Thriller Bark, the Straw Hats finally reach the Red Line, the halfway point of their journey. And at this moment, a significant shift takes place in the kinds of antagonists that the Straw Hats face. Up to this point, even Luffy's most powerful enemies were not true Pirate King material. All these pirates had never set out to conquer the seas and find the One Piece, or they had been hammered down and become disillusioned by their shortcomings. But when the Straw Hats arrive at the Saboady Archipelago, which is the only gateway to the New World, they learn that there are currently 9 other pirates with notable bounties on the island. This is where Luffy, for the first time, comes across true rivals in the form of Eustace Kid and Trafalgar Law. So just let this sink in for a moment. It has taken 500 chapters for Luffy to meet pirates that are cut from the same cloth as him. And this time, Luffy's declaration that he will be the one to become king of the pirates is no longer met with scorn and ridicule. Kid and Law react with hostility because they want the title for themselves. Both of them share Luffy's experiences. Kid reveals, for example, that he too was laughed at for his dreams, like Luffy back in Mocktown. But now, all 3 captains have proven their mettle and reached the entrance of the New World. In Kid's words, the New World is the place where those without lofty ambitions stand no chance. Everyone who prefers the easy path has, after all, by now already long dropped out of the race towards the end of the Grand Line. And it's no coincidence that this is also the point in the story where Luffy suffers multiple devastating defeats. Despite all his ambitions, Luffy is not yet strong enough for the New World. So the Straw Hats are forced to spend 2 years training in order to gain the strength they need to truly compete on the highest level of piracy. And when they finally set foot into the New World after the 2-year time skip, the greatest change from the Pirates of Paradise is a difference in scale. The major players of the New World are not single crews, as we saw before, but powerful pirate empires, with the 4 emperors, the most powerful and influential pirate captains in the New World, vying for dominance over the seas. In this place, an upcoming pirate can only survive in 2 ways. They must either affiliate themselves with one of the 4 emperors, or try to dethrone them. The first 400 chapters since the Straw Hats entered the New World have all been part of one elaborate storyline that has been published over the course of 10 years. At the time of writing, this mega saga only just concluded a few weeks ago. On the first island that Luffy visits in the New World, he forms a pirate alliance with his fellow rookie Trafalgar Law, with the purpose of taking down Kaido, one of the 4 emperors. And as the first step in their plan, they target one of the 7 warlords, Don Quixote Doflamingo. who's a powerful player in a new world. He rules over the kingdom of Dressrosa. He operates as an underground broker and offers Kaido a steady supply of artificial devil fruits called smiles. Now, it's commonly accepted by One Piece fans that Doflamingo is the New World counterpart to Crocodile, and that there are many conspicuous parallels between the Dressrosa and the Alabasta arcs. Both tell the story of a warlord of the sea who attempted to usurp a kingdom by discrediting its royal family. But where Crocodile's plan was foiled by the combined efforts of Vivi and the Straw Hats, Dressrosa has been under Doflamingo's thumb for 10 years. So in other words, Dressrosa shows what would have happened to Alabasta if Crocodile's plan had succeeded. But the New World equivalent of Crocodile is not merely the leader of a single organization, but an established player who is deeply entangled in all the machinations of the major factions in the New World. And what further distinguishes Doflamingo from Crocodile is the scope of their ambitions. As we saw earlier, Crocodile commented that his many years at sea had taught him that grand aspirations, such as becoming king of the pirates, were flights of fancy. But Doflamingo, on the other hand, never lacked major ambitions. This man has perhaps the most checkered backstory in all of One Piece. He was born as a celestial dragon, which is the highest class of nobility in the One Piece world. They are its absolute rulers who can commit even the most despicable atrocities without facing any consequences. But Doflamingo's father renounced his family's status as world nobles and elected to live among the commoners. But as a result, the Don Quixote family was lynched and tortured in retribution for all the suffering the celestial dragons had caused to the people of the One Piece world. But even in the face of these harrowing experiences, Doflamingo stops at nothing to once more regain his agency and enact his will on the world. As a result of being prosecuted, the young Doflamingo awakens supreme king haki, the power to overwhelm others with sheer force of will. This is an ability that only 1 in a million possess in the world of One Piece. Doflamingo also gained a group of unwavering followers who proclaim that he was chosen by the heavens. All his experiences have filled Doflamingo with an undying rage and a desire to see nothing less than the entire world burn. And unlike Crocodile, who could never bring himself to trust others, Doflamingo established one of the most loyal, tight-knit pirate crews in the entire series. And that might be putting it rather lightly. From a young age, Doflamingo's underlings worshipped him as a king. Their reverence for their leader was so great that they would set entire towns on fire because Doflamingo tripped on their roads. One of his followers does not even hesitate to give up her own life for her master. And in her very last moments, she affirms that Doflamingo will be the one to become the king of the pirates. All this serves to present Doflamingo as a warlord who has everything that Crocodile and Moria were lacking: trust in others, a band of loyal followers, and ambitions on a global scale. And yet, Doflamingo is ultimately nothing more than a stepping stone, a cog in the machinery of the New World. An extraordinarily powerful cog, perhaps, but a cog nonetheless. all he did over the years was maintaining peace in the pirating world and holding back the tide of the new era. When Law threatened to cut Doflamingo off from the substance he needed to create artificial devil fruits, the warlord is visibly shaken. He is in no position to make enemies with an emperor like Kaido. So there's a great irony between the difference in Doflamingo's self-image and the power he actually holds in the grand scheme of things. Doflamingo is the man with the power of the string fruit, which casts him as a literal puppet master. But while Doflamingo believed that he was the one pulling the strings in a new world, Luffy and Law unravel all of his ploys in the span of a single day. For them, taking down Doflamingo is but the first step in dismantling the powers that be. After the defeat of Doflamingo, Luffy is suddenly confronted with an unexpected complication. The Straw Hat cook Sanji has been blackmailed into a political marriage by another of the four emperors, Big Mom. Luffy decides to put his plans against Kaido on hold and sneaks into Big Mom's territory to bring back Sanji. The Straw Hats successfully crash the wedding, recover Sanji, and escape from Big Mom's clutches. Big Mom then swears vengeance after all the slights against her and follows the Straw Hats to Wano, the country ruled by Kaido. This leads Kaido and Big Mom to form a pirate alliance with the goal of finding the One Piece, and ultimately sets up a confrontation between two of the pirating world's most established figures and three upcoming rookies, Luffy, Law, as well as Eustace Kid. More than any other antagonist in One Piece, the stories of Big Mom and Kaido are deeply interwoven, both in terms of the story's actual plot and in its thematic messaging. As Emperors of the Sea, Big Mom and Kaido are among the four figures closest to the title of Pirate King. And to reflect this, their worldview and values are no longer presented in outright opposition to Luffy, but as warped, distorted versions of the values propagated by the narrative of One Piece so far. Over the course of the story, Luffy's journey has gained messianic undertones. We are given to understand more and more that Luffy is not just set to find a legendary treasure, but also to overthrow the corrupt world order and restore freedom to the world of One Piece. Everywhere he goes, Luffy defeats evil oppressors and brings salvation to their victims. And this includes many of the other humanoid races in the One Piece world, such as the Fishmen, the dwarves of the Tontada tribe, and the animal-like minks. The status of Pirate King is slowly built up to be the culmination of all that Luffy has represented to this point. After all, according to Luffy, the Pirate King is not a ruler, but the person with the most freedom in the entire world. In many ways, the pirate Charlotte Linlin, better known as Big Mom, serves as a foil to these ideals. She rules over an archipelago called Todoland, where each island is made up of a certain kind of food, of chocolate, nuts, and at its center, an entire cake. Todoland is a realm of plenty, where even buildings are edible and anyone can eat all they want. Todoland is also inhabited by people of all races, since it's Big Mom's dream to create a land where all people can live together without discrimination. All this gives us the impression that Big Mom's country is a paradise of sorts, a land of freedom and prosperity. But underneath this facade, lies a much darker reality. For we're shown that Big Mom holds naive, childlike ideas about equality and enforces them through her tyrannical rule. All this can be traced back to her experiences during her childhood. We're shown that when she was a young girl, Lin Lin had grown to enormous size and acquired monstrous strength. And since her parents could not deal with such a child, she had been abandoned and eventually ended up in an orphanage on Elbap, the island of giants. For the first time in her life, Lin Lin found people and buildings of her own size. And this led her to wish for a country where people of all races can live together as one family and sit around a table at the same eye level. And she means this in absurdly literal sense. Big Mom invests heavily in gigantification research in order that she can make everyone literally the same size as her. And during the flashback to her childhood, we're also shown the first traces of her warped ideas of peace and equality. She came across a bear and a wolf fighting in the woods, and since fighting is bad, she locked them in a cage to have them make up. The results of this were of course predictable. The bear killed the wolf, and in retaliation, Lin Lin beat the bear to death. And the same is true in Big Mom's false utopia, where abundance and peace is paradoxically enforced through submission and violence. During her rise as a pirate, Lin Lin created her land of peace through plunder and murder. Charlotte Lin Lin believes that people will become happy if they just do as she says. In her words, those who disobey are just being selfish, so I have to kill them. All this presents Big Mom as a major foil to Luffy. Despite all the atrocities that she has committed during her lifetime, she pursues roughly the same ideals as our protagonists, especially in the ways that both of them approach abstract concepts in naive, childlike ways. Yet, her oppressive equality is presented as a warped version of the true freedom that the Straw Hats bring to the islands they visit. What makes Big Mom so chilling is exactly that she, unlike all the other enemies that Luffy has faced so far, genuinely views herself as the hero of the story. This contrast is manifested most explicitly by the nature of their parties. The things that Luffy loves most in the world are foods and partying. And as a result, most major story arcs in One Piece are capped off with a giant party where the Straw Hats and their allies celebrate their victory. Luffy's parties generally coincide with the moment where the Straw Hats have restored freedom or taken down an oppressor. Big Mom, similarly, loves nothing more than her tea parties. These tea parties are presented as an attempt to recapture the happiest day of her life, the birthday she celebrated with her foster mother and fellow orphans. But Big Mom's tea parties are also an extension of her tyrannical rule. An invitation to Big Mom's tea party cannot be ignored. Any absentee is gifted the decapitated head of one of their loved ones in retaliation. Moreover, the ingredients for the sweets at the tea parties are acquired through pillaging and murder. In other words, where Luffy's parties are a celebration of freedom, Big Mom's parties are a form of oppression that leaves a trail of destruction in their wake. And, talking about invitations that cannot be refused, you are hereby cordially invited to subscribe to this channel a place where everyone is free to consume all future analysis videos on topics of my bidding. So, subscribe now, for I cannot guarantee that your loved ones will not be beheaded. The parallels between Luffy and Big Mom are further played up through the theme of foods. Both of them are presented as incredible gluttons throughout the story. In the case of Big Mom, her gluttony is deeply connected to her destructive tendencies, as we already saw in the case of her tea parties. This is brought out most strongly in her hunger pangs, from which she has suffered since her childhood. At times, Big Mom's desire for a certain kind of food overpowers her and leads her to consume everything in her path, until she has tasted the food that she was seeking out. But the most horrifying instance of this took place during her 6th birthday. As she was overcome by a feeding frenzy, she devoured even her foster mother and fellow orphans, without ever realizing what she had done. But while Big Mom is presented as a paradigm of uncontrolled voracity, the Whole Cake Island arc also paints Luffy's appetites in a surprisingly complicated light. This story arc begins with an incident that suggests that Luffy might be more similar to Big Mom than we would like to imagine. As the Straw Hats set sail to retrieve their cook Sanji, Luffy offers to prepare a meal in Sanji's place. But his thoughtless gluttony almost ends up killing his entire crew, because Luffy uses up all their supplies to create one single inedible mess. And suddenly, everyone on the ship is at risk of starvation. They go without food for a few days until they finally manage to catch a fish. Luffy then immediately digs into the catch without realizing that his skin is poisonous. He only survives the ordeal through an incredible stroke of luck. So while on one level this all serves to highlight the absence of Sanji, we're also shown that Luffy's gluttony, like that of Big Mom, can have disastrous consequences. But later in the same arc, Luffy shows that he can exercise control over his appetites when it matters most. When he finally reunites with Sanji, Sanji refuses to return to the Straw Hats out of fear for their safety. And as Sanji rides off, Luffy shouts after him that he will not eat anything until Sanji comes back. And despite his hunger, Luffy holds out until the moment that his cook finally returns. This moment reveals that despite his failings, Luffy will never succumb to the horrifying levels of gluttony displayed by Big Mom. The theme of food also carries over to the following story arc, where Luffy and his allies finally take down Big Mom and Kaido. But in stark contrast to the saturating abundance of Tado Land, the Wano country over which Kaido presides is a land of starvation. Ever since Kaido and his lackey Shogun Orochi took over the country 20 years ago, they filled it with weapon factories and turned Wano into a polluted wasteland with a massive class disparity. The upper classes live lives of luxury, while the rest of Wano's populace starves. The first person that Luffy befriends in Wano is Tama, a girl he saves from some of Kaido's goons. Tama offers her savior a single bowl of rice to express her gratitude. By far not enough to satisfy Luffy's hunger, but he appreciates the gesture nonetheless. But Luffy soon learns that this would have been Tama's first food in days, and that she only gets to eat rice twice per year. And once Luffy sets eyes on the lavish harvest reserved for the upper classes, he flies into a fit of rage. He swears that by the time he leaves the country, Wano will once more be a place where everyone can eat as much as they want. This is also how Luffy frames his opposition to Kaido. The reason he must take out the Emperor is because as long as Kaido is around, the people of Wano will never have enough to eat and drink. And when Kaido asks him in their final clash what kind of world Luffy would create, the answer is simple. A world in which his friends can eat as much food as they want. So in both the Whole Cake Island arc and the Wano arc, food serves as a metaphor for the more abstract concepts of freedom and prosperity. In Big Mom's case, both the false equality and the seeming abundance of her realm came about through violence and destruction. Kaido, in turn, uses slavery and oppression to fuel his warmongering ambitions, causing his subjects to starve. And when Luffy and his allies take down these two figures and bring freedom to the people of Wano, he also ensures plentiful food for everyone. Tellingly, there's free food at the festival celebrating Wano's liberation. But Kaido is more than just a tyrannical oppressor. Like Big Mom, he is another instance of a potential pirate king that went down a wrong path. Where Big Mom showcases a distorted version of equality, Kaido offers a distorted sense of freedom. Kaido's actions are governed by a belief in the survival of the fittest, that might makes right. He wishes to dismantle the unjust world order, like Luffy has said, but wants to introduce freedom by creating a world of violence, where everyone's value is determined by their strength in battle. This is also reflected in the meritocratic principles of Kaido's crew. All of its top officers have earned their position by fighting their way to the top. But in reality, what Kaido does is offer a false sense of freedom. His goal is merely to replace one group of oppressors with another. Kaido is a failed version of Luffy in another area as well. Since the time skip, One Piece has been building up a mysterious figure from 800 years ago known as Joy Boy. While we still know very little for certain about Joy Boy, we learn in the Wano arc that Joy Boy was the one who first left behind the treasure that the Pirate King Gold Roger discovered at the final island of the Grand Line. The treasure that is now known as the One Piece. And Joy Boy's treasure elicited a reaction that is true to his name. When Roger found it at the end of his journey, all he could do was laugh. Over the course of the fight between Luffy and Kaido, we are shown hints that the Emperor once attempted to become a new Joy Boy. When he first met his right-hand man King, Kaido believed that he was the only person who could change the world. And at least one point, he was able to convince King that he was Joy Boy. And when Kaido knocks down Luffy for the second time, he expresses disappointment that Luffy could not be Joy Boy either, which at least suggests that he too had once tried to become Joy Boy. Eventually, however, Kaido became disillusioned about his own prospects. Now, he holds onto the belief that Joy Boy will be the one who defeats him. In the present day, Kaido is very much not Joy Boy, but rather a very sad boy. The first time we meet him is during a suicide attempt. we're told that the Emperor is so ridiculously impervious to damage that he has made trying to kill himself into a hobby of sorts. And in his next appearance, Kaido is shown drinking away his sorrows and bursting into tears, none of which, of course, very good signs of his prospects for being Joy Boy. The failed Joy Boy Kaido also, however, spreads his misery to those in his country. As we've seen earlier, Doflamingo was a stepping stone in Luffy's and Law's plan to take down Kaido, because Doflamingo supplied Kaido with artificial devil fruits called smiles. But it's only in Wano that we discover their true nature. These imperfect creations have only a 10% chance of granting someone devil fruit powers. All others lose the ability to express any emotions except laughter. In other words, those who fail the smile lottery are left unable to even mourn their misfortune. Kaido and Doflamingo have dubbed these artificial devil fruits smiles in mockery of their victims. But the bitter truth behind these horrifying inventions has been in our face all along. The fruits that elicit fake laughter are created from a substance called SAD, SADS. All this presents Wano as the realm of a false Joy Boy, a land under the thumb of a depressed man whose tyrannical rule gave his subjects fake laughter that hides their true misery. And it's exactly in his fight against the false Joy Boy that Luffy awakens his devil fruit powers and is hailed as the true Joy Boy. Over the course of the fight between Luffy and Kaido, something remarkable happens. Both begin to laugh and enjoy themselves. So in a clash between two Joy Boy candidates, the fun becomes increasingly palpable. And when Luffy finally awakens his powers, the first thing he experiences is a fit of laughter. Just like the original Joy Boy, whose treasure made Roger burst out in laughter, Luffy's new powers are said to bring genuine smiles to the faces of all people, not like the fake smiles of Kaido. I'll leave it here for now. Although there's also plenty to be said about Blackbeard, the man who Luffy is set up to fight as his final pirate opponent, that might be a story better told once we find out all of its secrets. But more than just analyzing specific opponents that Luffy has faced, what I hope to have convinced you of is that One Piece is not just an incredibly long story. It's a story that requires its epic proportions to convey all it has to say and builds up an incredible journey from Luffy's humble beginnings to his current status as an Emperor of the Sea. And I, for one, can't wait to see where he goes from here.